what is the significance and the importance of understanding the real story, the full story of, let's just take the 1920s and what was happening with the Klan. We have this myth of, oh, that's just a Southern thing that happened a long time ago. But right, there's more to it than that.
Well, what people are saying, and I concur, is that Black history is American history. It's our origin story.
Yeah.
And the idea that it's just this, if we look at it at all, it's just for 1 month of the year, overlooks depth of how it's embedded in what we are as a nation and who we are.
Hi, friends. I'm Amy Julia Becker, and this is Love is Stronger Than Fear, a podcast about pursuing hope and healing in the midst of personal pain and social division. I'm here today with my friend Patricia Raybon, author of multiple award-winning books, all of which sit at the intersection of faith and race. And today's conversation is a little unusual compared to other podcast conversations because Pat has most recently written a mystery novel. We'll talk all about that, but I want to let you know that if you share this episode on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter by February 26th and tag me in the comments, you will be entered for a chance to win a copy of that mystery, Patricia's latest book, Double the Lies. That's the name of it. So today's conversation is a series of, reflections on faith and race, Black History Month, how Patricia ended up writing a mystery series, and also about the beauty and the truth that emerges from creative storytelling. I really loved this conversation, and I hope you will too.
Patricia, thank you so much for being here with us today.
I'm delighted. Always great to see you, Amy Julia. Thank you.
All right. So I'm here with my guest and friend, Patricia Raybon, who was one of the first guests ever on the Love is Stronger Than Fear podcast. I went back and looked, and I think it was episode 3 of when I started actually podcasting in a way where I was having conversations with people and not just talking. Because there I did a series of podcasts where all I did was talk. And then I started having conversations, and you were guest number 3. And the reason I invited you, this now is like 3 years ago, is because of the way in which you served as a mentor to me when I was writing White Picket Fences in particular. And at that point, I would have said, Patricia Raybon is a Christian nonfiction writer writing about race and justice and faith. And here I am interviewing you because you've just come out with a mystery novel called Double the Lies. So there's been a pivot in your writing career, although I think there's some through lines as well. And I thought before we talk about Double the Lies, this actual book that just came out, could you talk a little bit about this move from nonfiction to fiction, from, kind of memoir narrative to mystery? I'm just curious how you got from there to here.
Well, while you were talking about that, I wanted to say, blame the pandemic. That's really what happened. We were in isolation. We were, isolated, vaccinated, all those things. And in the world, we were going through one of the worst, dangerous pandemics in history. And so I said to my husband, there is nothing that could be worse than what's going on out in the world. So I'm just going to try to write something I've always wanted to write, mystery. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. I tried, and we'll see what happens.
Wow.
And so here we are with this second book in 3 years.
Right. And a third one coming.
Right. So that's the umbrella overarching answer to how this happened. But the other thing is, has to do with my love for the genre. I love clergy mysteries. I love mysteries in general because they, Walter Mosley says mysteries invite us to take a uncomfortable look world that we're living in. And then James Scott Bell, who also writes thrillers and writes about writing, says that the business of the novelist is trouble. So we were in this big trouble.
Yeah.
So there was And there's a certain amount of courage that's required to even think about the fiction format. That's what I've discovered. And so all of that collided and found me sitting here at my keyboard working on a little history mystery.
And I want to get back to both of those things, the history and the mystery part. But before we even do that, will you talk a little more about the courage to write fiction? I'm really curious to hear a little bit more of what you mean by that.
Well, what I didn't understand at all is that what works best in fiction is sass and audacity. And readers want to read about a protagonist who has all that operating, especially in a mystery, and will beyond common sense and good thinking, launch out to nab a bad guy or a bad girl.
Yeah.
Have the guts to do it. And so for me, soft-spoken, introverted, I had to tap into deep into something that's not naturally me to make it work.
Yeah.
Especially in the first book, which was, just I was really the newbie novice, and I still am actually. But I was saying to my granddaughter my high school granddaughter who loves writing too, the surprise that giving my protagonist bravery and courage would translate into my own life. And so I would say to myself, well, if she can do that, then I can go on Zoom and talk to Amy Julia. Or
that is so interesting.
It was it continues to be a very surprising discovery for me almost every day as I write and as I promote this series.
Right. And I should back up for a minute because Double the Lies, we've kind of mentioned this, but is the second of what will be a series surrounding a main character who's a really wonderful character named Annalise Spain. And I want to talk about her in a minute. The first book is All That Is Secret, just for listeners, if they're looking for it.
All That Is Secret. And the publisher, Tyndale House, quickly bought that first book, but then they came back immediately and said, would you turn this, or can you turn this into a series? So it went from me not even knowing if anybody would be interested in one book to having to write 3.
Yeah.
So
that's exciting. Yeah. And I want to talk more about before we get into Annalee and the history and the mystery of it all, which I do want to talk about, I'm curious whether the process of writing these books is significantly different for you than the process of writing your nonfiction books have been in the past.
Hugely different. In the craft way, fiction writing is immersive in a way that even the best nonfiction, and I'm thinking of your book, White Picket Fences, which is wonderful, but fiction is immersive in a deeper, grander, way. Robert McKee, the film doctor, are you familiar with his?
No.
Doorstopper of a book called Story.
Okay.
And so he says that we come to story not to escape life, but to find it. So that requires of the author this ability to generate this immersion in the writing so that the reader is from the beginning into the drama of the story. And that does not describe my nonfiction writing at all.
Yeah.
I think of myself as an honest writer, a transparent writer. And I also love quick writing. And in fact, my mystery novels are described as fast-paced.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to be clearing my throat, but the fiction format requires this immersion into the narrative, not just describing things, but describing what they mean and how they feel and how and all the sensory stuff,
Yeah.
how they look and smell and so because readers of fiction want that experience, they want to be they're not afraid of an 800 word no, 800 page novel. Mine are not that long. They'll read that.
Yeah.
Because they love the immersion and then finish and say, when's the next one?
It is so interesting. I love that distinction between escaping into a story and finding yourself or the world, right, in a story. And the thought that, and perhaps on some level, both are true with the best stories, where there is a feeling of like escape in the best sense of that word, and of finding something that is true and real. And it's so interesting to think about, in your case, this, fictional character from 100 years ago who, perhaps has some parallels to your own life, perhaps not, I don't know yet. But that could be a way of, for any of us who read historical fiction in particular, a way of finding ourselves in the past. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I do think that your book gives a way into some of the topics around race and faith and the power of story and relationships that I've seen in your nonfiction work, that show up in this book in a really different way. But before we do that, I thought it might be helpful for listeners to get a little bit of an introduction to this woman, Annalise Spain, and her story. So could you give us, without giving anything away, give us a little bit of the basics that we need to know in order to talk about this book?
Sure. Well, first, regarding the books, it said, it is a history mystery set in Colorado in 1923 when the Klan ruled the state.
Mm-hmm.
So my little protagonist, Annalise Spain, is a theologian who comes home to Colorado to solve the murder of her estranged father. That's book one. In book two, which just came out, Double the Lies, she is racing the clock to solve a different mystery before the Klan frames her for the crime. Her backstory is typically fiction-esque in its trope, and that is that she's a young woman who was abandoned at birth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now that's so trope-ish that I'm almost embarrassed to confess it, and it really reflects my novice status as a novelist. I went with a trope that I felt that I could use in the debut fiction,
mm-hmm.
that wouldn't frighten me or be so challenging that I would get lost or wouldn't know what to do. So I went with that trope. People understand abandonment.
Yeah.
And that's her background story, that she was found in the dirt in a mine shaft on the first day of her life. And so the man who found her, unreliable, kind of half-drunk miner in Colorado, takes her and raises her. And so his unreliability challenges her in countless ways, but she finds a little place for herself in that time in the world of the Black church. She's Black. The man who's raising her is Black, and they live by default in an all-Black neighborhood. It's a real neighborhood in Denver called 5 Points, And so the ladies in their neighborhood sort of help raise her, giving her a piece of cornbread on her way to school, because they know she probably hasn't had anything decent to eat, and wash her clothes. And so that's it. That's who she is, and manages to rise above that anyway.
Yeah.
And there's something in that, and she loves Sherlock Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
So with what she knows about Sherlock Holmes in her heart, and what she knows about being Black in her world, she takes on this task of trying to solve a murder when she's knows nothing about being a detective, but she's willing to try.
Yeah. Well, she is a really appealing character, and that's true throughout both books. I've read and enjoyed both of them. But I wanted to hone in on the historical part of it, because as you mentioned, we're in Denver nearly 100 years ago. The Klan is a big influence. The Black church is a big influence, especially, well, in both books, I guess. And I'm curious about that decision to write a history mystery. But why did you decide that? But also, what did you need to do in order to immerse yourself in the history of this time and place so that it could be as, well rendered and compelling as it is?
Well, winners write history. In fact, we're having witnessing a big debate about that in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
The governor's wanting to erase, or that's how it feels, to erase Black history. And so knowing that, and also growing up, I've been Black every day of my life in America. And so I know what the official history says, but I wanted to write a history through the eyes of a young woman of color who only has two assets: her faith, which is on many days not fully formed and wavering, and her courage. And I grew up in Colorado, and so I was aware of the Klan's prominence in the state during its second iteration in the early 20s.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I get so many notes from people, Amy Julia, that say, I never knew the Klan was in Colorado.
Yeah.
And, that Colorado had the second highest Klan membership per capita in the nation.
Yeah.
And the largest Klan membership per capita was in Indiana.
Well, that's, just as a little interjection, when I was in high school, I wrote my, junior US history paper, which was like a big deal at the time, 10 pages or something, but on the rise of the Klan in the Midwest in the 19 teens and 20s, following Birth of a Nation, the film, and around all of that. But even having done that, so I knew about the Midwestern aspect of the Klan, which was very surprising to me as a teenager. And I did not recognize the Colorado piece until, honestly, much more recently. I think, actually, what was the film? Black Gay
right.
Klansman.
Spike Lee's.
But yeah, so but then your book really obviously plays out, gives a lot more details because it is set in that historical perspective. And I am curious about, just as you tie together, obviously you're writing the research that you've done, your own experience, and our contemporary moment, as you said, of really wrestling with whether or not to be honest about our history as a nation, particularly as it pertains to Black Americans. But I think this is true in many, many ways. Like, what is the significance and the importance of understanding the real story, the full story of, let's just take the 1920s and what was happening with the Klan? We have this myth of, that's just a Southern thing that happened a long time ago. But there's more to it than that.
Well, what people are saying, and I concur, is that Black history is American history. It's our origin story.
Yeah.
And the idea that it's just this, if we look at it at all, it's just for 1 month of the year, overlooks the depth of how it's embedded in what we are as a nation and who we are. And so that was confirmed to me, Amy Julia, when I started reading just some amazing resources, first at the Denver Public Library, the digital collection at the library with oral histories and all of that is was just a phenomenal resource. But the other thing is something called the Colorado Historic Newspapers.com, which allows every paper that's ever been published in Colorado to be read sort of like a microfiche resource, but online, page by page.
Wow.
And so I could go into that resource and read the paper from those years and those times.
Yeah.
The Rocky Mountain American, the Klan newspaper, which published once a week. The Colorado Statesman, which was what we would call today the Black newspaper in Colorado. And so to read in real time, the Catholic Register, the Jewish Daily News, all of those papers were confirming, in addition to the books on the Klan in Colorado, what was happening on a day-to-day basis as people wrestled with this powerful influence, political influence in the state. Leaders from the governor on down were dues-paying members of the Klan. Mayors, sheriffs, police chiefs, jury commissioners. Every county in Colorado had a Klan clavern. And then, the Denver Public Library has all these photos from that era that show photographically, yes, this was happening, and here are these people, in their robes and hoods by the thousands in Boulder County, which we think of today as very progressive area.
Right. And it's not that long ago. And I think, again, reading Double the Lies, there's no sense of I'm reading a book that is trying to teach me my history. There is a sense of that exactly what you just described, that day-to-day, whether it's the fear that Annalee experiences at various points of I might truly be in danger in terms of my actual life, right? Because of this Klan influence, but also just the degradations and slights, and am I going to be allowed into a public space or not, only if essentially a white gatekeeper decides yes or no. There's an example of a man who gets beaten after giving a black man who gets beaten after giving a white woman a taxi ride, which she has insisted upon because she wants to demonstrate that she's fine riding in a car with a black man. And it's like, but that doesn't, he's not okay with that because it gets him beaten up, right? I mean, and killed. And so I think you do a great job of just weaving in what I can imagine from what you've just described, little snippets of that daily life that were reported on at the time.
Well, the nature of, thanks for mentioning that, because the nature of racism in America is that it's very casual and very, so I wrote it that way because that's been my experience. And so Annalee can go from at one point talking with the president of one of the biggest banks in the city to being insulted at a ticket counter at a movie theater.
Yeah.
That's just what happens it's part of how the culture works with regard to bigotry. And so when people sometimes ask me how much of Annalee is you, I used to say that, I worked hard for her to make her own self. And then I read that Faulkner, I think it was, Annalee said that there's a piece of the author in every character of any book that they write. So I'm sure that's true. And certainly for her, the piece of me that's in her story is that I tried anyway to deliver, is that very intimate understanding of what bigotry feels like on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if love is the right word, but I really appreciate the word. I wrote this down when you just said it. Racism in America is very casual, because I think that is one of the challenges in trying to talk about or undo the pernicious reality of racism. Obviously, some of the challenge is just the historical and systemic aspects of it. But I think another challenge that I haven't put in these words before is that sense of this is casual. And so it can be, oh, there was one ticket counter person who wouldn't let you have a ticket. Oh, well, right? Like that sense of it's so slight or, around the corner. And yet, again, when you live with a character through her daily life and see how those are ever present in every moment, and she's not wallowing, she's just being smart and careful and doing what she needs to do, and yet there is such a sense of restriction in what she's allowed to do and who she's allowed to be and how she's allowed to go about her life. And so and of course, this is what the best fiction does, right? It puts you, I mean, I, as a white woman from Connecticut in, 2023, still get a sense of what it feels like and how that quote unquote casual racism is unbelievably oppressive and unjust, right? I mean, you still get a sense of the feeling of that because of walking through that day-to-day existence with Anna Lee. So I appreciate the way you put that. I think that is something your book really does succeed in providing a reader, which is not even the center point of the novel, but it is an experience you receive as a reader.
I guess what the point being that that daily insult that so describes the life of not being white in America isn't just it's not isolated, and so it's happening to everybody who's not white every day, all the time,
right?
And so that happens. But the other thing is, I think about this all the time, Amy Julia, is that the challenge of it stirs up in people the need to respond in any way that one can, in my case, in a creative way. And I think in oppressed communities, you do see a level of creative energy and effort that maybe wouldn't be there if you weren't fighting it every day. So I have no idea of knowing if that had not been my experience, if I would still at my age still be doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
My husband and I had an interesting discussion recently. I said, am I supposed to just keep doing this?
Right.
I talked to an agent of, I'll tell you, it was Francine Rivers, who's a Christian novelist.
Yeah.
Her agent came up to me at, actually it was the Christie Awards, because the book won a Christie Award, which really surprised me. But anyway, I had said during my acceptance speech, which I didn't know I was going to have to make, that everybody there was so much younger than me. And so she came up to me afterwards and said, but this is your time. You have a few years under your belt, and she said, don't stop. There's whatever you know to say, you can do that now, because you don't have anything to prove.
Right. I'm curious too about that sense of creativity and generativity that comes out of a place of
yes, oppression.
It is out of a place of oppression, right? And the casual racism and the everyday sense of it. But I think there's also, I don't know, if these things do link together the way I'm wondering if they do. But as I think about whether it's Black History Month or just Black history more generally, of course, there is the story that goes back to, before our nation was even officially founded, right? The story of oppression and enslavement that has continued in various forms to this day.
Mhm.
There's also a story of triumph and creativity and celebration and beauty and wisdom and faith and artistic expression. And I mean, just so much that is just so rich and beautiful that has come out of the Black community, which I think also shows up in your book, especially when it comes to the role of the Black church. Annalise shows her own sense of just creativity with words, creativity with her life. But I just wonder if you can speak to that a little bit, that I don't think they're opposing at all. I think they're very interrelated, that history of oppression and, horror, and a history of wisdom and celebration and beauty. Yeah, I'm just curious if you can speak to that a little bit.
I think it says, well, for those of us who are believers, I think certainly we would say that it speaks to the presence of God in even the lives of the disinherited. If you know
Howard Thurman, yeah,
that what should have killed us all, in fact, turned us to the only all who could lift us out of that with and then let us, in while we're doing that, start singing. Only God.
Yeah.
In the Black church, we often say, talk about something that's negative, and then the phrase is, but God. And people will start to quote those places in the Bible where, with Joseph, for example, and his situation in Egypt. And then there are those words, but God.
Right.
And so we are but God people, but for God.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. None of what has come out of the community, I don't think, would have happened. And so it points people, and a lot of the Black, and in our country, a lot of that creativity is associated with the church in terms of ritual singing and preaching and all that. And so those creative expressions then overtly and directly point people to a God who is inspiring that. So that's, a churchy thing, a churchy answer.
Yeah.
But there is something in that, that in the oppressed, in the disinherited, there's some kind of a golden rescue that helps people find a way creatively to be creative as they're climbing out of it.
And I wonder too about that sense of, just seems to me that in order to connect to that which is the most true, good, and beautiful, right? That sense of who God is and how God operates in and among humans, some measure of vulnerability and dependence is necessary. And I don't mean by that we are letting go of kind of a sense of like self-awareness or confidence or ability, but there's still a sense of we need each other, we need God, and all of this stuff on the surface that seems so important can disappear in a moment's notice. Right. It is not guaranteed, and we've seen it go away, and we've seen how much it does not actually satisfy. And there's a real again, I think creativity, beauty, true joy, a depth to that experience that seems to be part of why sometimes out of that experience of oppression and being just overlooked, just because there's kind of the overt oppression, but then there's also the passive invisibility. Yes. And yet in both cases, when we can tap into that place inside, not just us individually, but us also as a community and as a people, that is true and that is seen by God and that is called forth by God. I think there's, again, I mean, you look at whether it's music or literature or ideas, or, we can just keep that list going, whether it's the Black church or kind of Black history more broadly. I think we see a lot of that truth and beauty and goodness that really speaks from the soul to the soul, and that is not on the surface.
So if that's true for a people who, were enslaved for hundreds of years, that truth then can be extended to everybody, because nobody's life is not without hurt, some pain, some hurt, something.
Yeah.
And so what the Black experience in America says to everybody else is, look for a way anyway to redeem that.
Mm-hmm.
And sit down at your keyboard or at your piano or whatever it is,
mm-hmm.
and make your music, and because the world needs it.
Yeah,
that's the thing that's really surprised me when people, well, a couple of things, Amy Julia, people will say, oh, I can't wait, I enjoyed this so much, I can't wait for the next story. But the other thing is, I keep hearing people say, I can't wait for the next story, I'm rooting for Anna Lee.
Mm-hmm.
They've are invested in a fictional world, in a fictional character, and they're saying, I want more because I want to root for her, and that does something for me to root for.
I'm curious, just as we kind of turn towards the end of this conversation, I'm curious about the mystery aspect of the work that you've been doing, because, you could have, and I know you've spoken a little bit to this, but you could have decided to just write a piece of historical fiction, right? That did not involve the kind of becoming a detective mystery aspect of things. And is there anything particular to mystery writing that either drew you in or that just felt like this is the only way this story gets to be told?
It's my favorite genre because, and always have been. I mean, I'm a Nancy Drew girl, going that far back.
Yeah.
But now I think I always love the mysteries because because a problem gets resolved and justice is done.
Right.
And that wasn't my experience. Even as a young child, seeing how the world operated. And so I'm pretty sure that's why I loved, and then the puzzle of it, I just loved all that part of it.
Right.
The thing that amazes me, now that I'm writing them, is how something that will get written in chapter 3 or 4 or something will reveal why it matters, reveal itself to me while it matters 20 chapters later.
Right.
And so there's something, and this is how I say it, explain it or speak to it, Amy Julia. I will say that the story was already written. God has already written every story. I'll say that.
Yeah.
And then the author's job is to sit down and take the dictation of it, because otherwise I'm not smart enough to know why these puzzles end up working the way they do. In the book Double the Lies, I can remember the moment when I realized how the deed was done.
Mm.
And I thought, oh my gosh.
And were you already writing at that point?
Yes. So I wrote 2 books as a pantser, and your audience probably knows what that means. There are 2 buckets that fiction authors fall into: the plotters, and those are authors who plot every minute of the book.
Okay.
And the pantsers write by the seat of their pants. So the first two, and Stephen King's a pantser. So everybody says, well, if Stephen King's a pantser, then, but what it is writing to discover. That's what now I didn't know that at first.
Right.
So but it's harder. It's exciting, but it's harder. So for the 3rd book, it was due pretty quickly. So I sat down and wrote out a plot, but I still found it exciting, and there were still things I discovered, including the how. And I thought, oh my goodness, of course, but I didn't see it at first.
And I've heard that not only, I mean, I don't actually know many people who I've spoken with who are writing mysteries, but in terms of fiction in general, and even in terms of music, people who are like, no, this was given to me. Like, it was my job to write it down or to sing it out or whatever, but it came from somewhere else. And in a kind of mysterious way, right? Like, even for people who would not, claim to have a relationship with God, I hear them talking about that sense of this came from outside of me, which I think is really, again, speaks back to that creative process as something that taps into something really deeply true about us as humans. I have one last question for you, and I am wondering if you feel like there are things that mystery or fiction can do that either nonfiction can't do, or that it's just a lot harder for nonfiction to do. Like, what is it that mystery and fiction is able, and we've spoken to this a little bit, but is there anything else you would say about what it's able to do?
Well, a couple of things. It invites people who are willing to suspend disbelief. And that's a huge invite. And so for people who are, because I've met a lot of people in these past couple of years who say, good job, Pat, but I really don't read fiction. It's make believe or whatever reason. Can be a certain snobbery about it.
Yeah.
For those who are willing to lean into it, that's one of the gifts that if you suspend disbelief, you're going to learn something out of the journey that's far greater than just the story inside the cover of the cover of this book.
Yeah.
And so that's there, and there, of course, we learn things from nonfiction books too. You from every book you've written, I've learned some wonderful things. There's something for fiction, though. There's something else that's happening that is I don't know if faith people would use the word magical, but there's something in that's available for people who are willing to take the journey.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. And I really do. I'm just so glad I waited. As you may know, I wanted to read the book just to decide, am I able to have a podcast conversation about a history mystery? I knew I would like it because I'd read the first one and I liked it, but I've never tried to actually talk with someone who's written fiction before, but I was pretty sure we could do it. And I'm really, really glad that I was able to just hear some of your process, as well as all of these just really rich ideas, which I think, again, indicates some of the things that fiction can do that nonfiction might be a little too, I think about is it Emily Dickinson, like tell the truth, but tell it slant, which, nonfiction can do that too. But there is a sense of being invited into, on the one hand, a fun and playful story. There is any mystery, there's some element of like, this is fun. We're solving a puzzle. We're figuring out a crime. And yet there's also something very serious and real that is able, as you said, to deal with so many of these historical themes and human themes and the menace that is very real in Annalee's life, but also in so many people's lives even today. And I'm grateful that we have had a chance to talk about that here. I
am too. Thank you so much. And thank you for those who hung around for the whole conversation. I hope they were blessed and inspired by it and found some joy in it.
Me too. I'm sure they were. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you.
Thanks as always for listening to this episode of Love is Stronger Than Fear. Again, if you share this episode, on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter by February 26th and tag me in the comments, you will be entered for a chance to win a copy of Patricia's latest book, Double the Lies. And I'd love to hear from you, so please do feel free to reach out. My email is amyjuliabeckerwriter@gmail.com with questions or comments or suggestions for guests. I always and also want to thank Jake Hansen for editing this podcast and thank Amber Beery, my social media coordinator, for doing all the other things to make sure this podcast gets out into the world. And finally, as you go into your day today, I hope you will carry with you the peace that comes from believing that love is stronger than fear.